we're going to get started. While everyone is filing in, there should be a little card in front of your place. If you can fill that out, we're going to have a little fun giveaway. I'll come around with this basket in a little bit, so make sure you do that. Okay, so as we're getting seated, if we can all bow our heads, I'll start us off in prayer. Dear God, thank you for this new season and the weather and just that we're in the flow. I know that there's so much going on for everybody. Help us to just slow down and take a breath. Thank you for Laura and all that she's going to share with us today. I know that we can all gain a lot from her and work towards a marriage that makes you happy and proud. We ask that you bless those working in childcare today and all of our littles, whether they're at home or at school, in childcare with us. Bless all of us. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, so just a reminder, everyone is checking in here in the sanctuary. I know we've got people always getting locked out. Once you need to get to the nursery, there's key fobs in the back in the wooden box. Please make sure that you return them. There's always one or two that go missing, so we need those back. If you have a child 2 and older, they go downstairs to room 20, and then the babies are in the back with the black wallpaper with the stars. That's the room. It's beautiful. So just a reminder about how breakfast works. So this is called a speaker week. During these weeks, hospitality provides this wonderful spread in the back. That's breakfast and coffee for everyone. If it is a Bible study week, so last year how we had Kathy Cafe talk to us, that would be your table. Some people got the joke. There will be breakfast by your table, so there should be a sign-up sheet that someone in your group is going to bring that breakfast. And then, again, it's always set up by 9. We try to start right at 9:15. Don't look too much at the clock today, so that we can end by 11. There's a free parenting workshop coming up. It is with Mark Gregston. It's going to be on Saturday, October 15th from 8:30 to 10. Breakfast is included, and there will be some childcare. So if you want to sign up for that, it's at cpcdanville.org. Okay, and coming up on Tuesday, October 18th, we have a pumpkin patch play date. We're not sure where yet, but some fun pumpkin patch for your kiddos. Check the highlights, and we'll give you more information, but save the date. Drop-in table today is table 6. Can you guys raise your hand? Right there. So if you don't have a home, that's your home. And then this week is table 3, working in childcare, and next week will be table 4, which is Beth's group. Okay, so before we welcome Laura up here, I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of her. Laura is a licensed marriage and family therapist and has been counseling couples and families for over 30 years. She has also served as Director of Marriage and Family Ministry here at CPC. Laura is passionate about healthy families and has been leading parenting and marriage conferences and seminars for over 25 years. She has recently had her first book published entitled Making Love Last, Divorce-Proofing Your Young Marriage. In her spare time, she enjoys being Nana to her 4 grandsons, cycling, golfing, traveling, and serving in Ethiopia. So let's welcome Laura.
I should have sat closer. Well, I am really excited to be with you today and share about this really important topic of how to stay connected when all of life seems to be pulling us apart as couples, right? That happens all the time. I think often as husband and wife, we can find ourselves living kind of separate lives in separate spaces, kind of more like roommates. And then we miss the joy of the shared life we signed up for at the beginning, right? So sometimes we also just drift into this disconnection. You know, we just let the demands of life pull us apart. But sometimes stress and disappointment cause us to start to feel negatively toward each other, and then we don't spend as much time together just to avoid the tension that we feel. I remember Gary and I had seasons where we just we're stretched to our max. You know, I'd ask him to help me with a computer problem, and he'd get really frustrated and miffed. And then he would ask me to do a small errand, and I would just snap. It's like I had no margin left. I was just hoping he wouldn't ask me to do one more thing or need anything from me, because I just didn't have it left, right? So, and sometimes we just got in these negative mindsets about each other, started to think the worst of each other. And when we feel negatively toward our mate, we tend to hold on to those negative beliefs, don't we? Kind of like a bulldog with a bone. We don't want to let them go. And most often, I've discovered that those beliefs are based in some assumptions, and those assumptions are based in fear. Fear of being hurt again, fear of being unseen, fear of losing out. And when we're in fear, ladies, I've been there and I'm sure you have too. When you're in fear, what do you notice it does to the relationship? Well, I've noticed that it just constricts the relationship. Rather than helping each other become all God intended each of us to be, we sometimes hinder the very growth we look for. And it's been my discovery that without some real intentionality about weeding out that negativity and also being very proactive about creating rituals of connection together, that you can slip into that whole separate life syndrome. So as we consider these negative mindset, which is where I'm going to go first, I'd like us to ponder the verse Romans 12:2. It says, "And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And how do we renew our minds? Well, the first step in renewing our minds is becoming aware of what's going on in here and in here. And then it's about being able to, being willing to let go of the ways that we're hindering the relationship. In my counseling practice, I've come across 4 key things that couples do that really wreak some havoc on their relationship. And I also want to share with you 7 things, 7 habits of leaning in that I think can really restore and help sustain a really thriving, loving, best friends kind of marriage. So I'm going to start with those 4 things that I think it would be good to let go of. And the first one is letting go of mind reading. Now, one form of mind reading is expecting your mate to read your mind. You know, it might go something like this. You know, I shouldn't have to even say what I'm thinking. You know, if he really loved me, he would just know. He would know. I wouldn't have to ask for what I need. And that belief has wreaked a lot of havoc on a lot of marriages. You know, there was recently a blog post that was called 24 Signs That You Found Your Soulmate. And it got 52,000 likes in 6 days. So very popular. And among the signs they offered were these. You can convey what you're thinking just by looking at each other. Or another key, they will know exactly what you need to calm you down and reduce your stress or to cheer you up. So you have this, you know, constant cheerleader by your side. Yeah, right. How realistic does that sound, ladies? Not so much. So the notion of finding that one person who knows you so completely, so thoroughly that you don't have to express yourself is very, very tempting. You know, it absolves you of the need to communicate what you're thinking and feeling. But again, this assumption has led to a lot of marital pain and resentment. A related assumption is believing that you can read your mate's mind. We do that too, don't we? You know, your husband unknowingly tracks mud in the house and you think, oh, he meant to do that. Or even, you know, he just doesn't care about me. He doesn't care about my efforts. He doesn't care about me. Or your husband fails to buy you something you hinted at for your birthday. What do you conclude, ladies? He doesn't even know me. He doesn't know me. He doesn't care about me. He doesn't hear me. So we make assumptions based on our own filters, and our filters are conditioned beliefs that we've had about what certain behaviors mean. And we do this kind of mind reading because we think if we can anticipate what's in their head, then we'll be able to protect ourselves in some way. But often, we're pretty wrong about those assumptions, and we jump to conclusions about what they're thinking. Assuming we can read our mate's mind leaves them feeling pretty hopeless, right, and misunderstood. So rather than mind reading, what can you do? A really simple thing is to ask your mate what they meant when they did or said what they did or said. Just ask him, what did you mean by that, rather than jumping. I like what actor and comedian Alden said about this. He said, begin challenging your own assumptions. Your assumptions are your windows on the world. Scrub them off every once in a while, or the light won't come in. I love that. The second thing we need to let go of, and a close cousin to mind reading, is negative interpretations. So let's say that you send your husband several texts during the day and he doesn't respond to you. You might interpret that as, I'm a really low priority. You know, he doesn't love me, he's ignoring me. But the truth is, on that particular day, he had a series of meetings and he never got to his phone. And so he comes home and he's pretty spent, and you lay into him and he gets defensive and lashes back at you. That kind of dynamic. When our mates say or do things that hurt or disappoint us, the internal reaction is always or often to protect ourselves. We view their actions in the worst possible light. We attribute the worst possible motive to them. And we do that because we don't want to feel vulnerable. We make conclusions and we react quickly. And of course, when we react negatively to them and interpret their reactions that way, it triggers their defensive reactions. And so they start to protect themselves and they launch into their own defense system, and then things go from bad to worse. And once that kind of escalation occurs, communication gets completely derailed. If we consistently interpret our mates' motives as negative, they feel pretty hopeless and unheard. So how can you get out of your tendency? If you're in this boat, and I was in this boat in a season of our marriage, I remember, how can you get out of your tendency to negatively interpret your spouse's behavior? I'm going to give you a few suggestions. First, pretty basic, give your mate the benefit of the doubt. Is it at all possible that you're interpreting this incorrectly? Is there even a glimmer of possibility of that? When you start to realize you're beginning to go down a negative spiral path about how you're seeing it, slow down and ask yourself that question. Is there any possibility I'm seeing it incorrectly? And I know this takes a lot of humility, because we like to think we're right about what the reason we're assigning to their behavior. But it really is important. We all like to think we're right, but the probability we've gotten it wrong is probably pretty good. So another thing you can do is ask your mate to help you understand what was going on for them when they did what they said. So, I noticed you did this. Tell me what was going on for you when you did that. And then be open to your response, to their response. Sometimes we think their response is an excuse of some kind, and if we negatively spin their response, clarifying why they did what they said, then it gets it goes downhill fast as well. So dismissing your mate's clarification can say more about your need to be right than it does about your desire to understand. My last suggestion for getting out of this habit of negative interpretations is probably the best one, and that is train your mind to go on a good hunt. Look for the good things he does. Look for the little things you love about him. Look for little moments of behavior or things he said or things he did, or even just bringing home a paycheck, or, I'm not suggesting you don't work. Some of you do. But let's give them a little, positivity. Look for the positive. And you know what? When we look for the negative only, we find only the negative. Our minds just go there because of something called confirmation bias. We look for what we intend to find. And if we stop doing that and we decide to look for the positive, guess what, ladies? You're going to find that too. You will. You just have to train your mind to look for it. Okay, a third thing you may need to let go of is resentment. Resentments are also based in fear. If I let go of my resentment, I might get hurt again. He might get away with it, or maybe he would repeat it if I don't keep holding on to it. Anger sometimes is underlying resentment. If I let go, they won't suffer enough for what they've done. Now, our feelings of resentment toward our partner may come from a childhood injury. Few of us leave childhood without some injuries. None of us are unscathed by childhood. Most of us carry injuries that predate our mate, but they get triggered in our relationship with our mate. So I would really encourage you to do a little bit of soul searching. When you tend to be reactive towards your mate, Spend some time looking at what that's about. If you're feeling resentment toward your mate, take some time to look at what your expectations were, what the disappointments were, how that might relate to some wound in childhood. Gather some insight for yourself about why that is. And remember that we all stumble in many ways, it says in James 3:2. Releasing your mate from your resentment says you understand that we all stumble in many ways, that we all fail, we're all frail in a way, and it frees them to grow and change when you can begin to release the resentment. So what other things can you do instead? I would encourage you, if you're in a place of resentment toward your mate right now, I would encourage you to share with your mate what you notice about how you're protecting your heart. That's what resentment does. It protects your heart. Share with your mate what you notice about how you're doing it. Tell them what they did that triggered the wound that you've had from childhood. And ask them to help you take down the wall between you so you can feel closer. So engage them in healing that. And then share with them what you need to feel safe. And if your mate continues in a pattern of hurt, communicate the boundaries that you're going to need to have in place until you begin to feel safe again. A final thing that would benefit your marriage to let go of is demands. Now, you may say to me, Laura, I don't really think I'm a very demanding person. I don't demand much of my husband. But demands come in many forms and have many faces to them. Most of us come into marriage with a picture of the way marriage is going to be. As I was growing up, my dad had one right way of doing everything. He had one right way of sweeping the porch. He was in the Navy, so he learned one thing: how to peel potatoes, how to sweep a porch, and there was only one. And so, consequently, when I got married, I had these unspoken expectations of what it meant to do a thorough job, right? And there was one right way. So was I surprised when he didn't sweep the porch like I would sweep the porch in that same thorough way, right? And since my dad's approval was very closely tied to how I performed, I really needed to get it right, and I felt compelled to inspire my husband to also get it right? Okay. Now, I didn't say, you have to do it like this. No, I just showed him how to do it, and then when he didn't do it, I withdrew my affection. That's a demand, ladies. That is what another form of demand looks like. And at the core of a demand is this belief that my mate is in charge of my happiness, that he has the power to make me happy or unhappy, that core belief. If I demand my husband sweep the patio in a certain way and I get really upset when he doesn't, I must believe that my happiness is being thwarted by him not doing it the way I think he should. Now, if you're married to someone who likes to please other people to avoid conflict, your demand might get a tidy porch, but you'll eventually end up with a pretty resentful partner. So now that said, I want to clarify that it is completely okay to desire that something be done a certain way, and you can request it. A request is very different than a demand. It doesn't carry that sense of ultimatum that is communicated by a demand. A demand would say, you need to sweep it like this, or you call that sweeping the porch. Even a criticism has a hidden demand in it, A request says it differently. A request says, I'd really appreciate it if you could get all those leaves in the corner when you sweep the porch. So you can ask for it, and then not withdrawing my affection when it doesn't get done. If there's a couple leaves left, not withdrawing my affection at that point. So I want you to consider your typical communication with your spouse. The last few times you've asked your mate to do something, did you do it in the language of a request or a demand? Consider how you could have expressed your desire as a request. And then practice saying it. You might think about this next time you want to ask for something. Practice saying it. And it's still always good to begin it with, I'd appreciate it if. That comes across much more as a request. They feel more respected, and they'll likely be more responsive. So those are the 4 things I think would be great to learn how to let go of and release. Pray about those. Try and release them if you find them in yourself. And now I'd like to share with you 7 things that I find if couples do them and lean into their marriage, it really helps weather a lot of the hard stuff that comes in marriage. Because we all know life happens, work piles up, finances get tight, kids misbehave, and in the midst of all those stresses and strains of life, your attention gets redirected to what's urgent. Often that's the kids. And your marriage suffers as a result. So, what can help you stay together in the midst of the daily grind? Marital research has found that it's not the big vacations, it's not the extravagant gifts, it's not even the romantic occasions that are the cement of a thriving marriage. It is the small increments of behavior, daily increments of behavior, that really cement a relationship and keep it alive and thriving. You ask your husband to pick up the laundry and he says, sure, instead of pretending he doesn't hear you. Or you sense he's stressed at work and you send him a funny text. Small increments of behavior. I would like to suggest that every moment of your married life you share with your spouse, you either lean in or you lean out. When you lean in, you nourish your relationship. When your spouse makes a bid for your attention or affection and you respond positively, that builds your relationship. You nourish connection. Your mate feels noticed and considered and valued. And when you lean out, you create distance, which over time can cause you to really feel very separate. So becoming aware of these small opportunities is really important to nurturing a loving relationship. Marital researcher John Gottman compares the things couples do to remain emotionally engaged as putting money in your emotional bank account. I love that thought. By doing it, you can remain emotionally engaged, but when you don't do it, you tend to experience distance. And partners that respond positively to their mate's bids for attention, affection, or humor, or support are putting deposits into that bank account. And when the hard times come, they have more in the bank to weather those difficulties than couples who neglect putting regular deposits in the bank. So think of leaning into your marriage as a daily habit. It's kind of like brushing your teeth or checking your email. In time, the things you do to enrich your relationship, you'll have to think about them now and be intentional, but eventually you won't even have to think about them. They just become the DNA of your relationship. I love what it says in John 13:34. Jesus says very simply, love one another. He then goes on to ask us, not just ask us, but commands us, as I have loved you, so you must love one another. And I see these ways of leaning in, I'm about to share with you, as ways we can move toward that love that Jesus calls us into. The first way to lean into your marriage is kind of a no-brainer, but in marital therapy, I find often that couples have neglected this one, and it's expressing appreciation. We all like to feel appreciated, don't we? It tells us that what we have to bring to the relationship is noticed and it's valued. A simple word of appreciation can go a really long way to reduce stress and help your mate calm down internally. And it also benefits you to focus on what you're grateful for. We know that appreciation and gratefulness activates the hypothalamus in our brain, which then reduces stress and improves our sleep. So it's good for you, and appreciation's also really good for your marriage. Your mate brings in the garbage cans and you just say, thank you. Their day just got lighter. Or send an appreciative text during the day. Regular expressions of gratefulness for their efforts or their character. It can be even who they are or what they do. Can really sustain a sense of connection. So, how can you improve your appreciation? I would encourage you to daily express one quality or action that you've noticed about your husband that you really appreciate. And after a week, if you do this daily, if you commit to doing it daily, after a week, I want you to notice the sense of connection that you feel. Things do shift and change. The second way to lean in and be intentional is to think about your goodbyes and hellos. For most couple, work days involve one or both of them leaving in the morning and coming home at night. Now, during COVID, sometimes many work at home. But even there's a time where they go into the closet or the bedroom or wherever where their office is, and you separate during the mornings, oftentimes. Always think about that. Points of parting and reuniting. They're important moments that can connect you or create more distance. Couples whose schedules or moods dictate their neglect of goodbyes and hellos really end up drifting apart. Now, maybe you've been sliding toward that kind of disconnection in your own relationship. You don't even connect in the morning when you depart. You don't kiss each other goodbye. You go about your day thinking about what you need to do. At the end of the day, one of you comes home and one of you's off doing your emails and social media or whatever, and the other one comes in, doesn't even find the other person in the house and gets about what they're doing, and there's very little connection. Sound familiar to anyone? Here's a few simple rituals of connection that could make a big difference in how close you feel. And the first one is, I really recommend that you kiss each other hello and goodbye, or hello in the morning when you part, even if he's just going, or you're just going in another room, and then kiss each other hello whenever you reconnect at the end of the day. Very important moments that often get neglected. And before you leave in the morning, I would encourage you to find out one thing about your partner's day, and vice versa. He can find out one about yours, that you are anticipating or dreading that is coming up during the day. Maybe it's a difficult conversation you're going to have. Maybe it's an important meeting. Maybe just an errand. Whatever it is you've got on your plate that day, share one thing about your day. That way you have the other person in mind during the day. And if it's a difficult thing, you can pray for them during the day. But you always find out just one thing. And then when you come back together at the end of the day, maybe over dinner, you ask each other about that one thing. It creates a thread of interest and care in your relationship to do that. And it's very simple. And you can have 5 kids around you. It doesn't matter. You can do this one. And then another one is be sure you kiss each other goodnight. A lot of couples neglect this because a lot of couples don't go to bed at the same time. I really urge you to try and find a way. I know some people are night people and others aren't. To try and go to bed at the same time, because those are moments that you have some even short, but conversations as you go to bed together that you wouldn't ordinarily have if you don't. I also strongly urge people to get technology out of the bedroom. You know, put it in the kitchen, put it where else, but try not to have technology in the bedroom. It interrupts a lot of communication between a husband and wife. So kiss each other goodnight, at least. If you can't go to bed together for some reason, make sure you do that goodnight kiss. I really do believe these very intentional moments that you just do, these brief little connections, make a big difference in the long-term quality of your married life. Another way to lean is to nurture shared interests. You've probably heard that opposites attract, and I think often they do. If you think your husband, you probably think, okay, he is different from me in these certain ways. And often because we are different, we have different interests in what we do. My husband Gary loves to fly fish. I love the out of doors, but the idea of being on a boat for 9 hours at a time with bugs all over me, not my idea of a fun day. But I love water sports, and he's more of a land guy. But over the years, we've learned to lean into each other's interests. I go fly fishing with him, and he will go snorkeling with me. So, leaning into your mate's interest is a gift to both of you. It stretches you, and it stretches him, depending on if it's your interest. And it also just allows them to enjoy what they do and have your presence there. Now, this isn't to say you can't enjoy some activities that your spouse doesn't share. I just encourage you to have them be limited because it can drain off energy from the marriage if you have too much. Also, sometimes one person's interest can become a shared one. Years back, I began a cycling group with a bunch of women, and our training days was Saturday morning, which was our, formerly my husband and our weekend time together. And so he was feeling kind of sad about that. So he decided that he would become the videographer for our cycling group. And so he showed up at all our trainings and all our events and whatnot, and he took pictures throughout the season. And at the end, he made a DVD for every woman. And man, was he popular. They really loved him. And so after that, we just both have been riding. He bought a bike, and we've been riding together ever since. So my interest became his, and it's really enriched our life together. So what are some of your shared interests? If you'd like to nurture this in your relationship, I'm recommending to you do this. I'd suggest that you take a sheet of paper and you write down 10 things you both enjoy doing separately. And then once you've done that, you share your list, and if there's anything that's the same on list, just highlight it with a highlighter. And if there's anything that is on the others list that you might be willing to try, mark an X on that. And then grab your calendar and try and schedule 2 of those, maybe one of the highlighted ones and one of the X's, or 2 of the highlighted ones, just 2 a month, and do those activities together. It really has a way of forging a really special, playful connection. Another way to lean into the relationship is to laugh together. When was the last time that you and your husband had a really good laugh together? There's something about the bonding power of a good laugh. And most of us encounter a whole lot of stress in our lives, and what happens when we get stressed out? We get serious, right? When we're stressed. Bob Hope said laughter is, he's a comedian, said laughter is like an instant vacation, and I love that. You know, it has the function of an instant vacation. It just relaxes you, reminds us there's joy even in the mundane parts of life. And so let yourself get silly, ladies. I know life can be serious, but let yourself get kind of silly and playful. Your kids will love it. Maybe play chase around the house or hide and go seek or something silly that you might have played as a child. And do it with your husband and a kitten, and I'm sure the kids will probably want to get engaged too, most likely. Or watch a television show that makes you both laugh. My husband and I have been enjoying Ted Lasso. We can't wait for the next season to come along. That was we just had a good time laughing on that one. But find your own. Find whatever makes you two laugh. Or find a funny YouTube or video or app and send it to your spouse during the workday. You might also think about developing an inside joke. That's always fun. Some years back, my husband was given a birthday card that showed this older couple. And he's looking over this land of, this bay, and there's a peninsula, and he says to her very authoritatively, and that landmass over there is called a stick out because of the way it sticks out in the water. And then you open the card, and it says 1 year older and 1 year closer to making up bunk. And so, I didn't say bunk, but that's, anyway, but so anytime we're in a company of someone who's saying something kind of questionable, we whisper to each other, stick out. And we just laugh. It's really fun. So find your own little inside joke and enjoy it. Another thing you can do to increase the laughter in your relationship is just to try and find 3 things that are guaranteed to make you both laugh, and do them regularly. Try and spend some time focusing on that, because I do think a steady diet of humor in your relationship goes a long way to giving your relationship that elasticity you need for the two of you to stay connected, especially when challenges hit. Another way to lean into your marriage is forgiving. When we're hurt, it is very natural to want to protect ourselves from further pain. We hesitate to offer forgiveness to our mate. In protecting ourselves, though, and withholding forgiveness, we actually contribute to the lack of safety in the relationship. If your partner can't mess up without being punished, they'll learn to hide themselves and put barriers up between you. Sometimes I think if we forgive our mates, either the behavior is going to be repeated or they won't take their offense seriously, and we want them to feel the sting of our distance so they understand the severity of their offense. We don't want them to minimize or excuse what they've done in any way. But forgiveness is not about condoning or going easy on a violation. Forgiveness, in most instances, is more about releasing the offender from any debt that they owe you and giving up your need for any retribution. It allows you to be free from ongoing anger and bitterness and consuming negative thoughts. How often do we need to forgive? Well, Henry Nouwen said, forgiveness is love practiced among people who love poorly. That means we need to forgive over and over and over again. One thing that has really helped me in this area of forgiveness is to realize and become conscious of my own flaws. That there's some things that are hard about living with me too. And also realizing how much God has forgiven me. Luke 6:37 says, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And my experience of his forgiveness is that he's very generous, and it's very undeserved, and it's very frequent. And so becoming a generous forgiver has helped me to really get a glimpse of how much he's forgiven me. So what can you do to become a better forgiver? Just check your heart. Check your heart and see if there's any unforgiveness that's just a residue in there. Anything you're holding towards your mate. And then remember how much you have been forgiven. Choose to release them from the debt they owe you, and then lovingly express that forgiveness to them. Another way to lean into your marriage is by physical touch. Research consistently reveals the value of touch in the life of a growing child can never be underestimated. Touch communicates to a child that they are loved, valued, safe, wanted. And touch communicates the same to adults. We never outgrow our need for physical touch. Virginia Satir is a famed family therapist, and she once said that we need 4 hugs a day for survival, 8 hugs a day for maintenance, and 12 hugs a day for growth. I love that. Physical connection is crucial, really, to our well-being. And in marriage, we have that wonderful opportunity that nobody else has like we do to provide touch and receive touch from our mate. And it's not just about lovemaking, ladies. It's also about just holding hands and putting a hand on a shoulder or around the waist or on the knee as you're sitting next to each other, or massaging each other, or holding hands. You know, it's all of the above, kissing. All this says you're important to me, you are loved, and I care. Now, you may be uncomfortable with physical touch. And if so, it's likely you grew up in a home without much affectionate contact. And so this is going to be a growth area for you. But rather than rebuffing touch because of your discomfort, I would encourage you to coach yourself to receive touch as a sign and evidence that you are loved and you are valued by your mate. You might share with your mate what is most comfortable for you and then move toward those areas that are less comfortable. Do you know that the act of embracing each other actually floods our body with oxytocin? And oxytocin is the bonding hormone that increases trust and security within a relationship. Yeah, so it's really important. So what can you do to increase touch in your relationship? You might sit down with your spouse and write down the 5 ways you most like to receive touch, because oftentimes it's different. And then share your list with each other, and then commit to offering your mate one thing on their list a day. You can do this as a joint project with your husband to help you enjoy and move toward a richer relationship of touch. One final way I want to talk about to lean into your relationship is a hard one, and that is to apologize. Nobody likes to be wrong. Don't we all like to be right a whole lot more than being wrong, right? Okay. And as a result, our apologizing is not our go-to reflex typically. We're much more inclined to defend or excuse ourselves. You know, our pride gets in the way. But I want to first clarify to you what is not an apology. If you're feeling frustrated or hurt or disappointed, how does it feel when someone says to you, or your husband says to you, "I'm sorry you feel that way"? How's that feel? Is that comforting? Does that touch you? No. That's more of it avoids any ownership of their wrongdoing, right? And on the receiving end of that, you feel pretty dismissed. Like, you're sorry for my feelings? How does that work, you know? So that's not an apology. Another one is, "I'm sorry, but I had a lot on my plate today." That feels more like an excuse, right? Than a real heartfelt apology. Or how about this one? Okay, I'm sorry. You know, feels like you're checking a box more than you're really sincerely apologizing. You know, we all make mistakes. We're all prone to do things that hurt or frustrate our mate. And when we do, a sincere apology is the most effective way to restore the relationship and repair the hurt. An apology done well is a really powerful tool in a marriage that can restore it. Ken Sande was the founder of Peacemakers, and he came up with 4 really excellent suggestions for a really robust, heartfelt apology. I'm going to add one thing to his, and that's the first thing, which is search yourself. Before you approach your mate, take some time to consider your own self-protective parts that may come in that want to minimize or defend the offense. Pay attention to what's going on inside of you before you approach your mate. This is if you're apologizing. By the way, you can share this with your husbands, ladies, so that they have a good idea of what a robust apology is too. But first, search yourself. We tend to minimize or defend, so you want to pay attention to if there's any of that going on inside of you, because we're all prone to rationalize, so be brutally honest with yourself. Imagine being on the receiving end of what you did or said. Second, admit in detail. This is really important. Your offense might be minor, like forgetting to put something on your calendar or failing to run an errand, or it might be big, such as betraying a trust or hiding an addiction. Admitting involves acknowledging your fault with no excuses, no minimization. And when you admit your wrongdoing, I really encourage you to be specific. Not just, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry that I did da-da-da-da-da, and be very specific about what it was that was the offense. That feels a whole lot better when you can actually identify what it is you did. That makes it clear in the other person's head that you get it and that you've identified that behavior. And a vague apology is not nearly as impactful as a detailed one that clearly states what occurred. And then thirdly, acknowledge the impact. This is really important. We rarely ever do this in an apology, but it's very powerful, is try to understand and empathize with the pain or the impact of what you did on your mate. You might ask them, because you can't know, you don't live inside your head. You might ask them, what did it feel like when I did that? What was the impact on you? Now, I realize this does take some humility, but it's really valuable to get at what it was that they were feeling. Maybe they felt hurt or inconvenienced or frustrated or disappointed. Let them know that it makes sense to you, whatever it is that they're feeling. And fourth, accept the consequences. So the offense, whatever you've done, might cause your mate to withdraw for a little while, and you really need to let them have that time, and vice versa. Husbands need to let wives have time, because we can't instantly forgive sometimes. We need time to process it, especially if one of us is a slower processor than the other. We need to let the other one have the time. And if the offense is big, it's going to wound a core part of the person, and they may need longer. But let them know you understand their need for time. It's okay that you don't forgive. If any of you are pleasers, you're going to want instant reconnection. And you might be more demanding about a quick repair. Notice that about yourself, that anxiety that you have, and just take a deep breath and let it be, and let your mate know you'll wait. And it might help to approach them and say, hey, is there anything else I can do to soothe what's going on for you? But don't demand an instant apology. Finally, alter your behavior. Changing how you treat your mate is evidence that you are really taking it seriously and you sincerely desire to love them better. Altering the behavior is a sign that your heart was engaged in the apology. Now, in most situations, each of you holds some responsibility for what happened, right? But you can't apologize for your mate's side of things. You can only own your own side of things, but you can fully own it without a reciprocated apology. Apologies are unilateral. That means you admit your part of the conflict. And if you demand that your mate own their part as a condition for offering your part, it's not a very sincere apology. Your mate may need time to get their defensive self to step down before they can acknowledge their part. And if you give them that time, then it's helpful, because then when they come to you, it might be sincere. It's much more important that an apology be sincere than it be extracted from an unwilling partner. So that is a robust apology. And you know what? You can teach your children to do this too. Teach your children when they're apologizing to give a very robust one. So hopefully you can think about those 4 or 5 things that are really important. So learning to lean in, to move toward your mate instead of away is something you can do every moment of your married life. Becoming more generous with your appreciation is going to increase the fondness in your relationship and help you stay focused on why you said I do in the first place. New habits of parting and greeting and increasing physical touch will help you feel connected throughout the day. Laughing together and developing shared interests will reduce your stress and deepen your marital friendship. And apologizing and forgiving will help you resolve differences and repair the hurt and ensure the elasticity your relationship needs to weather the hard times. Being proactive and instilling these new habits is going to really nourish your marriage for a lifetime. My favorite Bible verse when it comes to marriage comes out of Colossians 3:12 and 13. It says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you." What strikes me in this verse is the idea of clothing ourselves with these attitudes. Sometimes they are not our go-to attitudes toward our spouse, are they? They're actually things we need to learn how to put on. I'm often judgmental rather than compassionate, snarky rather than kind, thinking I'm right rather than humble, harsh rather than gentle, impatient rather than patient. And I have to be mindful to put those qualities on. And yet the good news is I'm not alone in this. I don't have to try to do it myself. God really has a vested interest in helping me become that more kind and loving person He desires. Yeah, we have to bear each other. We have to bear our mates' flaws and imperfections and failings, but then they have to bear us as well. And what's the motivation for clothing ourselves like this? What's the motivation for bearing our mate? It's really how much we've been forgiven. We are to forgive as much as the Lord has forgiven us. I don't know about you, but for me, that's a lot. So I do hope these tips for letting go and leaning in will be helpful to you and help you avoid the separate lives syndrome. I think the world in its busyness and stress is really designed to pull us apart. And we also have the expectations that marriage should be easier than it is. But remember, your mate is a work in progress. And it does take work and intentionality to stay together. Much of what I've shared to you today is in my book, Making Love Last, Divorce-Proofing Your Young Marriage, and I really encourage you to enjoy it and get a copy if you haven't. It's got a lot of practical help in it, and I'll be over at the book table after as I get down, and I just pray that God will bless you as you learn to let go and lean in. That's right.
So thank you, Laura. We were going to open it up to some Q&A. If anybody has any questions, I can bring the microphone to you, or if you have a loud voice. And while we're doing that, the basket's coming around, so make sure you get your card in there so we can do our giveaway. But are there any questions? Oh, over there.
Yes,
Do you have recommendations on rebuilding trust?
Rebuilding trust. Yes. It really depends a bit on the